Hi, and welcome to another episode of All Things Considered. Tonight I would like to speak to you about affordable housing in the Seattle area. It says here, in increasingly expensive South King County, cities band together for affordable housing. So I guess it's more than just Seattle that's getting on board with this, if they really are getting on board with this. It's possible they could just be saying this to make themselves look good. It says here that South King Housing and Homeless Partners, 9 South King County cities and the county have signed an agreement to coordinate affordable housing efforts. The area, long a bastion of affordability, has seen high home prices spill over from Seattle's housing market. Now, when you say that, they have seen high home prices spill over from Seattle's housing market. Okay, now, I don't know too many people that are low income or that are homeless that can afford a home. You can afford a home if you're working for Microsoft. You can afford a home if you're working in upper echelons of Amazon. You can afford a home if you have really good money. If you're homeless, you'd be lucky if you could get a room to rent, because the lowest of low incomes and homeless, they make only $771 a month on disability and even less on welfare. But it says here that these are the cities: Burien, Tukwila, Renton, Normandy Park, Kent, Des Moines, Covington, Auburn, and Federal Way. I guess those are the ones that are going in on this. Facing a regional affordable housing squeeze, 9 South King County cities are for the first time working together in an effort to maintain the area's historic role as a source of affordable housing. Well, when I lived back in the 90s, back in Seattle, rent was reasonable. I had a one-bedroom apartment in Capitol Hill. It cost me $495 a month. What has happened, Seattle? What has happened? South King Housing and Homeless Partners will start small, providing policy advice and advocating for members. Well, you guys have had almost 30 years to get this taken care of. Almost 30 years? That's kind of a long time to not do nothing. With the eventual goals of building and potentially running affordable housing developments, as a long-standing consortium of East Side cities already does. Long a bastion of affordable housing, South King County is seeing prices rise as developers and landlords cater to people fleeing Seattle's housing market, and the area grapples with a nationwide housing shortage. Well, you also have a whole bunch of people moving into the city from other states because they think they can make a quick buck. This isn't the Klondike. While Zillow estimated median rent in Seattle rose less than 1% from January 2018 to June of 2019, rents in South County cities within the partnership jumped about 4.5%. We want to make sure people who work in this community can live in this community. Well, that's great. If you're working, you should be able to afford it. But they're not talking, when people like this article that I'm reading from, when they talk about when people are working, they're talking about the upper middle class. They're not talking about the minimum wage person here. Let's get that straight right off the bat. Nobody talks about the poor, the ones that are making less than $1,000 a month. Nobody talks about the ones making minimum wage at $15 an hour. They're talking about the ones that are the upper middle class, the ones that are the cool kids at the cool table. That's who they're talking about. We want to make sure that people who work in this community can live in this community, said Federal Way Mayor Jim Farrell. So that means I got to write this guy a letter now. The trend of flight south from the city has displaced residents, particularly immigrants, refugees, and people of color. The demographic of many clients served by Muslim Housing Services, a Seattle-based nonprofit that aids needy families. About 5 years ago, the organization started placing families in South King County due to high Seattle housing costs. Now, the organization is getting priced out of South King County too, limiting the number of chronically homeless families it's able to assist. And whose need is greatest, said Executive Director Rizwai. When there's fewer affordable units, the time spent in homelessness shelters goes up. He said, while the organization's clients came from Seattle shelters in 2019, the King County point-in-time count estimated nearly 1 in 5 people experiencing homelessness were in South King County, the largest proportion outside Seattle. Auburn Mayor Nancy Backus, who chairs the partnership, said it will apply an equity lens to its work. I have to write to her now too. Focusing on people most affected by the affordable housing crunch, much of what the partnership will look like is still to be determined. What you got to do, and people don't want to hear this, but you got to be honest with yourself. You got to say whether you want poor people in your city or not. If you want poor people in your city, you have to say, okay, it's okay to be poor in our city. We will help you. If you don't want poor people in your city, and the best way to not deal with them is to ignore them, that's bad. And that's what Seattle's doing, is ignoring the poor people. Yeah. It says here, when there's fewer affordable units, the time spent in homeless shelters goes up. Okay, I just read that. Okay. The decade leading to 2017 saw a loss of 36,000 affordable units countywide, according to a task force report. Backus stressed the importance of a sub-regional approach that includes a focus on preserving South King County's historical stock of affordable housing. Now, when I lived in Seattle back in the 90s, and I worked at the Downtown Emergency Service Center, people could get housing. They had what was called in-house Section 8. Housing, apartments especially, apartments would go along with that in-house Section 8. It's only good for that apartment. It's not good for any other apartment. Once you leave that apartment, your Section 8 disappears. In-house Section 8. The city would make up for the difference. The city would cover that because the affordable housing was in such high demand. Even back in the 90s, there was a lot of income, a lot of people that needed apartments. And people would rent apartments to somebody, and the city or the state or the federal government would reimburse them for the remainder of the rent. Okay, but because that hasn't happened in a long time, Backus stressed the importance of a sub-regional approach that includes a focus on preserving South King County's historical stock of affordable housing. What works in Seattle isn't necessarily going to work in Auburn, she said. One of the challenges facing South King County is the increased burden that comes with the suburbanization of poverty, said King County Council member Dave Upthegrove. Yeah, that's the way it is. I'll spell it for you. I'm telling you, Dave, Upthegrove. Upthegrove. Never heard of it, but that's his name, unless I'm pronouncing it wrong. It's an opening trend. Bookings Institute research found an 80% increase in people who met the federal definition of poverty living in Seattle suburbs. From 2000 to 2011, overall, 2/3 of Seattle metro area residents in poverty lived in suburbs. Auburn, where Zillow estimated yearly median rent prices have jumped 24% in 5 years, has dedicated city staff to getting the partnership up and running. Auburn, Burien, Covington, Des Moines, Federal Way, Kent, Normandy, Park, Renton, Tukwila, and King counties have signed on to the agreement with the option for other cities to join later. Now, having said all that, because everything is so expensive in Seattle, you can make $60,000 a year and be considered low income. And when they say they're building low-income apartments, affordable housing, they're talking about those people that are making $60,000 a year. They're not talking about the people that are making less than $10,000 a year. People on people on SSI, people on Social Security, people on welfare and veterans pay. They're not, Seattle and South King County and all that, they're not talking about people like that. They're not talking about the ones that are extremely hurting for financial money and financial help. They're talking about the people that under normal circumstances should be living like a king. If you lived anywhere else in the United States except for major cities that are overpriced and you made $60,000 a year, you could own a house and a car and a life and a lifestyle. But not in Seattle. It didn't used to be like that. I am so appalled and upset and angered at how Seattle has allowed itself to become. It has pimped itself out to the highest bidder, and it has allowed people to take advantage of her, and that's not cool. It just isn't cool. And they talk and talk and talk, and that's all they do is just talk and talk. They don't do anything else. I have in several videos given ideas on how to fix things, but you got to want to be fixed first. And I keep asking myself, does the city council want anything better? Does the citizens of Seattle, do you guys want anything better? Are you happy with the way things are? Do you like it to be rich because it makes you feel like you're in a rich city? I just watched a movie with Kevin Costner and Dennis Leary. And the movie was called Draft Day. And Dennis Leary plays the coach. And he says to Kevin Costner's character, who is the general manager of the Cleveland Browns, he says, "My wife wasn't exactly thrilled when I moved to Cleveland because Dallas is a rich town with a lot of rich people." And Kevin Costner says, "Oh, well, we have rich people here too." And Dennis Leary said, No, you don't. And that's fine by me. I like it. But my wife, she is used to a lot of rich things. And it just kind of makes me think, a lot of the people that move to Seattle, are they moving because they think it's rich? They think it's cool to be in a rich town, so rich that you can't afford it, but you're there. Like when I lived in Los Angeles and I was working for Warner Brothers Studios, I lived 3 blocks away from the city limits of Beverly Hills. 3 blocks away. But when people asked me where I lived at, I was able to tell them, I live in Beverly Hills. My apartment at that time was costing me $1,500 a month for a small studio apartment with a kitchen in it. But it was 3 blocks away from Beverly Hills. And when you live in Los Angeles and you say, I live in Beverly Hills, people take notice. Anyway, I'm going to let you go on that note. If you like my videos, please put a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button. If you have an idea for a video, please put it in the comments below. If you think my videos suck and I need to be thrown out with the bathwater, let me know that too. If you have an idea that I can do to make my videos better, please let me know. I would really appreciate it. And if you decide that you don't want to listen to me anymore, just say, hey, I'm taking a breeze. And I'll wish you all the best and hope you come back. This has been All Things Considered. Have a good night, Seattle, and all points beyond.